Riley is a retiree from the Amateur Radio Enforcement Division, and he was in the Enforcement Program and Compliance as a legal advisor for enforcement. Did I get all that right? Okay, that was a long field. And we just now heard in a forum, in the ARRL forum, about how chaotic amateur bands were for many years, and how the ARRL had kept insisting that something be done about enforcement, and that people kept resisting that at the Bureau until finally, Riley was appointed to serve in the position that he's so well known for. And you know, things have improved in the amateur radio community, and we owe it all to one man, to Riley Hollingsworth. Riley.
Let me know if you can't hear me. Can everybody hear me?
What is that?
No. Now can you hear?
Yes.
Thanks for inviting me. I had a horrible week and almost had to cancel the trip. Last week my 81-year-old aunt went missing. We'd given her a birthday party, taken her home. And we couldn't find her, and we heard nothing for days. And as it turns out, she had watched Dr. Oz and saw that you live longer if you walk a mile a day for exercise. And so for a week, we didn't know where the hell she was. So finally found her ambling down the side of the road near Hanover, Pennsylvania. And then when I got here, what David said is true. I almost got shot. Tracy picked me up, and since the hotel is dry, we stopped at a bar, and Jim Haney provided a delightful surprise by being there. And as it turns out, you know, Jim served 3 terms, and his period more or less coincided with mine. And he introduced me to Old Charter Bourbon, and I gave up Ezra Brooks, and so we go back the way. So we're sitting there, having a few drinks outside, as David said, and 2 gunshots went off right in the street. I heard people running and waiters hollering. And I looked over at Jim, and he's just sitting there stirring his drink. He didn't even bat an eye. So I'm thinking, I realize this is Texas, but good Lord, man, what's going on here? Now I'm going to start out with some preliminaries. First, if any cell phones go off, I'm not here. If I die, go to Gettysburg and talk to my wife, and you'll get some good deals on ham equipment. Everything in both radio rooms costs about $150, she'll tell you. I always get asked 3 questions at every one of these things, and you know, I can't believe you suckers still come out for these sermons, but nevertheless, I always get asked 3 questions, so I'm going to get all this out of the way first. First, will no code ruin amateur radio? No more than the development of single sideband did. And the AMers said that would be the end of amateur radio. That was all over. And secondly, you know, my job is not to make you feel good. My job is to try to get amateur radio to last 1,000 years. So I want to tell you that less than 1% of you file comments in the rulemaking proceeding to eliminate amateur radio. So if it wasn't important then, it sure isn't important now. And CQ activity, the CW activity actually is up. And looking, I know this is the ARRL National Convention, but maybe a little bit of heresy here to quote CQ magazine. But anyway, in the February issue, it says that the number of active hams has increased steadily in recent years, as well as the number of active hams using CW. The number of CW QSOs reported for field day has grown nearly 40,000 from 2005 to 2010. So I think you can see that that's not a problem, and I see that there's probably more interested in code now that you don't have to do it. And then lastly, I always get, Uncle Remus, what is your favorite enforcement story? So I do have one. I'll go ahead and tell you that and get it over with. And if you've heard it, I didn't ask you to come here. It's the one where I learned early on that a wife or a girlfriend can be the most effective enforcement tool we have. And that's why I often sent tapes out to the derelicts, as we call them. There was a 50% chance that the wife would get the mail.
Yep.
And say, gee, what's in this package? Nothing just came from the FCC. Well, what are these tapes for? And invariably, she's going to listen to them, and you can close that case out within a few weeks. This happened the first year of enforcement, and the first year I used to get so aggravated about what the band sounded like, that it would often sour my entire weekend. So one Friday afternoon, I decided to call and try to resolve something before it ruined my weekend. I just had the gut feeling that maybe we could get it resolved on the telephone. So I called down and the wife answered, and I asked for so-and-so, the amateur operator. And she asked what, she said, he's not there, but what's this about? So against my better judgment, I told her what was going on about the interference and some of the language and so forth and all the complaints. And there was a pause, and I'll never forget it. Then she said, well, I'll tell you what, he gets home around 6, and I can guarantee you that after 6:15 tonight, you'll never have this problem. We never heard from or about that guy. In later years, I felt sorry for him and thought maybe I should call down there, but then decided I'll just leave well enough alone, and we'll take enforcement anywhere we can get it. And the last question, how did I get started in amateur radio? Well, when I had to be politically correct, I said it was because of a breadboard shortwave receiver my dad bought me. And that part was true, but the truth is, it was before that. My uncle, LD, and LD didn't stand for anything. That seems to be common in the South. But my Uncle LD lived in a mill village in South Carolina. He'd been a radioman in the Army. And he detested the lady next door, Mrs. Bagley. He just detested her because he hated her dogs. And the dogs were like the Bumpus hounds on the Christmas Story. You see every year. He built a 3-tube device that would interfere with television reception. And when my cousins and I would go over there, he'd get it out. And we could see Miss Bagley through her window in the recliner chair watching Stokes. So he would warm it up and then say, watch this. He would flip a switch, and slowly but surely Miss Bagley would get up out of the recliner chair and go over and slap the hell out of the television. Then he would flip it off. We did this so many times, and I was fascinated with those tubes. And I did get the breadboard later, and then a night kid space scanner, and I was hooked. But it started out just being fascinated with radio tubes. And there are us today in this room that wasted all this beautiful modern solid-state equipment to at least get hot. I'll have one tube in it somewhere, but it's not going to happen. Now, I'm going to get down to business with you, and I finally accepted the fact that I get emotional about this topic, so that's just the way it is. So bear with me. But 11 years ago, when I had the privilege of speaking to you at the huge dinner at the Nutter Center in Dayton, I brought your attention to a 20-year-old fellow named Brian. And I first met Brian in Albuquerque, I think the year before at HamFest, and he was teaching a class in fox hunting. And you may have noticed that fox hunting is gaining worldwide attention. I could tell at the time that he was a natural-born teacher, and I ran into him again at other places, and he always impressed me. And at that dinner I said, take a good look at Brian, and let's sincerely hope that the future of amateur radio is in the hands of people like Brian. If so, Brian will no doubt do a better job of looking after our spectrum than we did. And I said to Brian, when you're up on this stage 15 years from now, I hope it isn't necessary even one time to use the word enforcement. And about that the same year, an 11-year-old girl named Andrea obtained an amateur radio license. And in the years after that, I'd often see her at ham events, talking to youth groups, and later becoming a contributing editor for QST magazine. And in both these people, I could see an enthusiasm for radio. And in the years afterwards, many, many times, I privately hoped that they could become the future of amateur radio. But given the state of amateur radio at the time, it was a very far-fetched wish. Well, we see that Brian Miloshovsky is a lead director now for the Rocky Mountain Division, working for the Sandia National Lab, and then we see that Andrea Hartledge is a vice director from the Southeastern Division, and she's studying aerospace engineering at Georgia Tech. And if I embarrassed you, that's your own fault for being beautiful and smart. I can't control that. Go ahead and stand up. So the future that so many of us wanted to see for amateur radio, they brought us. And I thank you for what you're doing and for your enthusiasm and for your talent and for your interest in the magic of radio. Now all of us, including Andrea and Brian, stand on the shoulders of a lot of great people who gave us this wonderful service known as amateur radio. And to the people in the room today that are in their 70s and 80s, you are our greatest generation. You taught us everything about ham radio and delivered a legacy that joyfully occupies our lives. And we thank you for that. Our long-sought new people coming into radio now by the thousands will stand on your shoulders, as we all do. You've left amateur radio a legacy that will make it last forever if we do our part. You know, I thought almost every day about people who are so devoted to amateur radio, and I realize that you're all bound together by one common bond, and that's the love of the magic of radio and public service. You're the people that want to make a difference, who want to leave a legacy and make the world a better place. And I thought about what inspired all the people I see to be so giving of your personal time in a world where there are never enough hours in a day. Why you're so dedicated with little or no regard to fame or even recognition. Amateurs that organize HamFest, help out in disasters, and teach classes evidently understand that one of the greatest joys in doing anything is to experience joy in doing it. You care about life, you think about what you're doing with amateur radio, and most of all, you have a vision and a passion for amateur radio and for its success. And we all know that old Forster saying, one person with passion is better than 40 people merely interested. I've thought 1,000 times about what must motivate you. It has to be far beyond what Teddy Roosevelt said. Do the best you can with what you have, where you are. You all do that, but it's a lot more. The North Carolina writer Thomas Wolfe said that we're the sum of all the parts of our lives. And as we walk around this event and see the joy and enthusiasm and devotion, it becomes clear to me that, and this has especially been evident since Hurricane Katrina, when amateur radio had yet another finest hour, that in your passion for radio and technology, and for running clubs, field day operations, de-expeditions, public service events, and for helping out in Joplin, Missouri, and countless other events, it's got to be more than that. And it is, and this is what it is. You care more than others think wise, you risk more than others think safe, you dream more than others think practical, and you expect more than others think possible. And people, that defines excellence. Walking around the floor here, I'm amazed at the leaps in technology that have occurred since that dinner in Dayton in 2000. You look at Flex Radio, you look at the Elecraft Linear, auto tuners by LDG, and countless other devices out there that are state-of-the-art and beyond. I think of the hours and hours of labor that went into those creations, and I know that it's a labor of love. My dedicated people who tried and failed better each time, and finally got it right. Michael Jordan said, I missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot, and I missed. I failed over and over again in my life, and that's why I succeed. And I think that applies to you folks. And you show that the inventor and tinker in the basement is a keystone of technical innovation. And your passion is a more powerful force than pecuniary interest ever will be. And let that be your contribution. And it'll be contagious to all our newcomers and to amateur radio. Now, the only thing that we can count on is change, and we have to embrace it. Everything changes or it dies. Changes in technology, ours included, are exponential. When the Concorde supersonic passenger plane landed at Dulles, the inventor of the jet turbine was there to watch it come in. It's just mind-boggling. And we see what wonderful change, right now. The president of the ARRL is a woman. and so much nicer looking than either Haney or Harrison. She still has that endearing Southern accent. And I like coming to Texas because nobody has an accent. And she has already changed amateur radio. If you were at the DX banquet last night, look at the winners and the prizes. Women won all the good stuff. Is Kay good or what? Now we should all be reminded that we can thank the League on the occasion of this 2011 National Convention for the catalyst that returned the Commission to amateur enforcement. The League's July 1998 letter to the Commission, after many similar letters, was a game changer that resulted in the Commission's return to its responsibilities regarding amateur enforcement. And I want to caution you once again, as I take these sermons around the country and don't even pass a collection plate, every gift of lasting value comes with responsibility. And as I said, my goal in life is not to make you feel good, although you certainly deserve that. My goal in life is to help amateur radio last 1,000 years. The thousands of new people coming into amateur radio, don't get complacent. Your responsibility is to keep them interested in amateur radio and to mentor them just as you were mentored. Jim Haney said that the first time you ever went fishing or first time you ever went hunting, you probably didn't go by yourself. Somebody helped you and somebody showed you the way. And Dave Sumner always says that it's not important what you did to get into amateur radio, it's what you do after you get there. So lots of these new licensees are here because of emergency communications entries. So your job, while that may be your most valuable contribution to emergency communications, your job is to keep these people interested in amateur radio and show them all the facets of amateur radio, because they won't stay if you don't show them now. The teachers and trainers and VEs are doing their part to get them here, and the question is, what are we doing to keep them? And again, every gift of lasting value comes with responsibility. Unfortunately, we've learned in the past couple of years that in our economy and everything, nothing is too big or too good to fail, and amateur radio is no exception. Now, as to enforcement, I get to this point because I know you're going to ask me. Believe me, you're in good hands. Laura Smith is just as tough and strict as she is nice and polite. I have spies in the FCC who tell me that she works very, very hard, comes in early, leaves late, and she knows enforcement. Her family and her husband's family have been in enforcement for years, and she used to work in the rules, part of amateur radio service. Now you have to remember that I had one advantage that Laura doesn't have. For years I could publish everything we did, every letter, and over the years as the Privacy Act was ratcheted down, we could only publish final actions, warnings and forfeitures and so forth, unless it involved a letter to a corporation. So keep in mind that what you see in the enforcement releases is just the tip of the iceberg. I still get a number of email complaints, and I have never once brought one to Laura that she didn't already know about or wasn't already working on. And in the future years after the era of Laura Smith, and I hope that's decades away, continue to demand the quality of enforcement that you're now getting from the Commission. You deserve it, and you must not tolerate the Commission's ever turning away from its responsibilities again. And speaking of the League, I would hate to think what would have happened to amateur radio service had it not been for the technical department at the League at Air Company, working on VPL and holding the Commission's feet to the fire. And let's hope that the League never has to expend so many resources to get the Commission back on track. And of course, it's my heartfelt duty to remind you, and once again, if you don't want to hear this, you should have gone out to the flea market instead of coming to church. Remember what the big knob is for, is to change frequencies, and thank God Flex Radio now has a big knob. It's worried me for quite a while. If you hear stupid things on the bands, and keep in mind, as Laura said, nobody has yet figured out how to regulate stupid. Just change frequencies and just enjoy amateur radio. Don't be like the person who once complained to the Commission about a 20-minute obscene telephone call. Just go to another frequency and don't be baited. And if there weren't demented people in the world, there would be no demand for sensible people like us. Some people on the bands literally have no life except to get up in the morning and think of something or somebody to hate or resent.
Yep.
That's just how they live. They were probably that way in the 4th grade, and they're that way now. And we see this across society. Society is ill-tempered, thin-skinned, and very, very anxious to take offense. And you can see it at the shopping center, and you see people yelling at each other over a parking space when there's 150 vacant ones. You can see it everywhere. It's just how they live. So don't dignify them with a response. And remember, the world is ugly enough as it is. So don't add to it. They're old and they're bitter anyway. And if they won the lottery, they complain about how it was paid out. So if Laura doesn't go, the Grim Reaper will. And this helped us several times in recent years, much to my delight. So just enjoy amateur radio and pursue your passion and let radio joyfully occupy your lives. And if you do that, that'll be your best contribution to amateur radio, and it'll be contagious to all the new people we fortunately have coming into radio. I'll take any questions and refer to Laura.
Enforcement, if there is any work, what can the commission do about the Canadians that, and what can they do about the Italians that?
Well, there's two questions there. One is international enforcement, and I'm speaking for my tenure only. The Columbia field office work closely with other countries, and generally they're very responsive. If they have a shortwave broadcast station go haywire, they fix it. They don't have the same time tables that we do, and it might be 3 months or 2 months rather than a week. Now, except for Canada, they don't give a rip about anything as near as I can tell. You can threaten to kill the entire Canadian government, they won't raise an eyebrow. So I don't have an explanation for the Canadian part of it. It's just, it is what it is. Anybody else? Okay, this is great. No other questions. Italy? I'm not familiar with the Italian problem. I've never heard it on the air. I've never heard any complaints about it. Perhaps Laura can answer that. So even the questions I planned didn't even show up.
How plugged in are you with what goes on in the FCC now and the policies that they run versus, I mean, are you still stay plugged into them pretty close?
I've always tried to avoid the policy issues. No, I'm not plugged in. I hear about things. I talk to Laura once in a while, and I get complaints a lot, and I get chewed out about once a month for not doing something in the enforcement area about somebody who doesn't even know that I retired 3 years ago. I used to just get those over to Laura. So your best source would be people in the commission or the league. There's one over here, right here.
Talk to us about Glenn Baxter. What was the slowdown in getting him pulled off the air, and why is he still getting on the air now?
Well, that's an ongoing case, and I couldn't comment about it. And it's a beautiful question for Laura, but I doubt that she can either. I'll leave that up to her.
What happens to the reports from the official observers that they say they send to the league and the FCC?
From the what service?
The official observers?
OOs. Well, they go, it's coordinated through the league, and they go to Laura's office, and they get a lot of complaints, and in a lot of cases she already knows about it and they're working on it. But one thing, as I said, one advantage that the enforcement doesn't have now is the Privacy Act. And I can publish everything we did, 308B letters, everything I could publish it, and that was a wonderful enforcement deterrent. But we don't have that now, so you have to pick specific instances and ask the commission specifically. Anything else? One back here, Stanley?
Riley, used to be a monitoring station in South Texas. I know they closed up. Would you comment on the closure of various monitoring stations and how they're still able to do enforcement?
Well, shortly after the invention of that one computer chip, I can't think of what it was, they realized that monitoring could be done actually better from Columbia from one source. And although they closed down the monitoring stations, What they don't necessarily advertise is they didn't take down the antennas. So they're monitoring locations all over the country, and I've seen it operate, and it works in a split second. And they can coordinate the bearings and at least get mission personnel within the ground wave of the signal. And it's just as effective and probably more effective because the equipment they have now can take bearings on signals that the ear can't detect from a receiver. And that's probably all that can be said about it at this time, but it's extremely effective, and it's one of 3 such monitoring stations in the world. And people come from all over the world to look at it. There's one beside you.
Yes, I have a question that would probably upset HamCom, but is there anything that can be done about the fact that HamCom radios are probably the most easily modifiable radios? And I know of countless public safety officers that are running HamCom ham radios in their vehicles.
No, I'm not familiar with that issue.
No, it happens.
But I know there are ongoing complaints about how equipment can be modified.
And hams are helping out.
Thank you.
Mr. Hollingsworth, the Peter King proposals, should we laugh or cry? Is this an oncoming thing?
Well, the best information source about that as to what it is and the status of it is the league. They're working on that. This is a proposal in Congress related to the 450 band. The league is working on that actively. In fact, I think Dan Henderson was working on that with people today, so the league can give you the very latest and greatest on that. And I think the league general counsel recently met with a congressional delegation. Is that true, Ken? Or gave some testimony about it.
Now that you're retired and have more time to play with amateur radio rather than enforce it, what facets of the hobby do you personally enjoy and do?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, the question is, now that I supposedly have more time to play with amateur radio, what facets do I enjoy? Well, I do have a little bit more time, but the problem about retirement is that everything you neglected and didn't work on because you had to go to work breaks, leaks, shorts out, or falls off the wall. It's like it knows that you're retired. And the first week or two, first week I decided it was very nice to sit out on the deck every morning, drink a cup of coffee. And I did that, but every time I would see something in the yard that broke or needed fixed or needed cut off or pruned or something, so I gave that up. There is more time and you have a little bit more control of it. But for some odd reason, I can't say that it's a noticeable amount of more time. It's just, I know I don't drive to work. I walk down the hall, I go to the office, or I go to the yard, or go to the antennas or something. I can't explain why there's not really more time, but I just know you get up in the morning realizing you can do anything you wanted to do, and you go to bed at night aggravated because you didn't get anything done that you didn't do. I don't know. Exactly. And everybody seems to tell me that. That's just the way it is, I guess. And their time goes exponentially. And in the length of time that I was in enforcement, I realized I'll probably be dead because of too many ham-fest hot dogs. I just can't expect to live a long lifespan after so many of those things. At Dayton one year, I got one of those hot dogs off that rotisserie thing like you see in the 7-Elevens. And I took it off and I said, no, I got to put this back. It'll take 15 minutes off my life. I'm not going to do it. But I carved my call sign in it before I put it back. For the next 2 years, I saw K4Z. I won't get to the mountaintop with you. If it's possible to think wherever I go, I'll be thinking about it. Any other questions?
Here in the West Gulf Division, we've seen to have an increase in power line interference problem. Then during your tenure in enforcement, what was your experience in dealing with power line companies?
Well, when you hear about how old our bridges are, and our highways, and you have an interstate bridge falling in the river. It's very old, and our power grid is the same way. And that's part of the problem. Sometimes the municipality runs the power system, sometimes it's an individual power company. And I found them overall to be very, very cooperative. Not so much with the ones that were bought and sold. You know, sometimes you don't know who your bank is until you get a statement the next month because they're bought and sold so many times. And a lot of times it's that way with the power company. The smaller power companies and the ones that are more stable usually have one or two people that have been handling power line interference cases for years, and they're very proud of it. And if you can get to them, it's a technical challenge for them to solve it. But I got very good cooperation. It takes a little longer than you think. And one thing we didn't want to happen was, at least when I was there, we didn't want a lineman to get killed, hurt, and working on some power line issue that related to amateur radio, because we thought that would have so much adverse publicity. And these people deal with very high voltages, and those of you in that business know that you don't want to see photographs of an accident that happens with the power lines, just you never forget it the rest of your life. But generally they were okay. I don't know how they are with Laura's time, and I know the league does a very good job in teaching them how to find power line interference cases. And I know that when a power company says we spent $50,000 and we can't find this, that tells me they don't know how to find it. Because the equipment that is required to find power line interference costs less than 2 men in a bucket truck for 2 days. And so each case is different. The most interesting case, though, was the Lubbock, Texas case. There were 2 power companies involved in that. And this case is old and it's closed, so it doesn't matter to talk about it. But we sent a warning letter to the power company, and when they responded, they sent a copy to the television station for whatever reason. I guess thinking that the television station would, get their news people on it, saying that the FCC is beating up on a power company. But quite the opposite. When they put it on the news, they had 20 to 30 complaints from citizens in the community about similar complaints to the power company. And one family sent in a video of a power connection, power line or something that they complained about for a couple of years. They had a video of it falling down on the tool shed and burning it down. So it more or less backfired on that power company. That was fixed very quickly after that. And so in other cases where the power company seemed a little bit obstreperous, and we usually get a call from their lawyer that they retained who knew all the answers but hadn't thought of any of the questions. And we start arguing, and we said, well, let me send you a video, a couple of letters in the video that sort of explains what this power line situation is all about. And we sent them the news tape of that, and those are always solved. Very, very, very good, because they don't have publicity. But it's difficult for them to do. Sometimes it's difficult to run down, and especially when it involves high voltage lines and regular voltage lines and multiple power companies. But you'd have to ask Laura how she feels about the ones she's handling. I know I left her a lot of them, but a lot of the ones I had were getting solved or were solved over time. It just takes a lot longer than you think. And what a person thinks is power line interference oftentimes isn't. And I wish I could have brought you the complaints about that type of interference that I had, or cases of interference like that. And it brings out a point that Laura brings out, that most interference is not deliberate, and a lot of interference isn't really power line interference. In fact, we had an engineer at the FCC who shall remain nameless complain to the Columbia monitoring station about interference, and they couldn't find it. It was in a 20-meter band. They absolutely could not find it, and they don't like to get in situations where they can't find something. It's a challenge to them. That turned out to be the circuit board on a new Maytag washer that the engineer had bought the week before. And it almost is never what you think it is, and what a lot of people think is power line interference. You can't just assume that's what it is. There's so much junk out there today. Battery chargers, chargers for golf carts, and electric fences particularly go haywire. And so it's just not always a simple process to find it. One more question?
You brought up the Maytag washer. As technology has moved on, appliances are a great example. If you have a problem with a Maytag washer, Maytag says, well, that's an appliance. It's not an FCC Part 15 device. You're in a tough situation. Do you think there's going to be any move in the future towards getting some kind of corralling around appliances and so forth that historically didn't generate RF but now do?
Well, I hope so, because when the Maytag people tell you that it's Part 15, that's your first warning flag. I've never met anybody that understood Part 15. We were ready to hire somebody once, and in discussion of that, they said they were well versed in it and fully understood it, but they didn't get hired because nobody fully understands it. It's very, very complicated. So the best thing to do in a situation like that is bring it to the commission's attention, because chances are that's not the only complaint they have. They can work with the manufacturer, or they can tell you that it's within permissible limits. It's just not something you can work out with the manufacturer. Now, some of them already have heard of the problem, and some of them will seek you a fix for that. Especially some of the lighting companies that make these lights that go underneath cabinets, some of the transformers do that, and they have replaced them. And they react individually just like individuals do. It just depends on the company you're dealing with. But I never heard of any more complaints about the circuit boards in the Maytags. But it's something you really need to bring to the commission's attention, because they may not know it, or chances are they're working on it, and they want to see what the magnitude of it is. Okay, one more.
Remember the Russian woodpecker? Any information you got from that? Is there anything of that nature that you're aware of going on at this time beyond our shores?
I don't know of anything, but this will be the third year that I have been retired. I hear all kinds of strange noises, but I know with the bands like they are in the sunspots, there's just a lot of weird stuff this season. But I don't know personally. I haven't heard of anything, but I'm not the best source of it. But I think that was a Russian over-the-horizon radar, wasn't it? Okay, so no more questions. I let you out a little bit early because I know there's a forum that follows this one. Thanks for coming.